I'm going to check to see if you went on Facebook this time.
There we go.
Hey, you are broadcasting it. Holy shit.
All right, how about it? Another episode on the Anti-Development Show, the show about everything and nothing, where the points don't matter and nobody really wins. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So what are we talking about?
You mentioned something in a comment and a post that we should talk about this time in terms of like the clusterfuck of thinking in our heads and all the noise that goes on up here in trying to, I think it was like decipher, understand what's actually happening. But I'll let you go a little more on that because I'm not exactly sure what you meant.
Well, I didn't actually say it.
Oh, you did?
A guy
Okay,
that
great.
a guy that listened to last week's podcast. He and I were going back and forth in comments, and he said something to the effect of, if I could just stop arguing with the voices in my head that produce such laziness, or something to the effect of that. And I was like, all right. So I said, wow, that might be something we should be talking about, because it's a freeze, fight, flight, and fawn response that people have. We're mistaking that voice in our head for our actual voice. And it's creating and emoting itself into existence, which we're responding to that made up reality, as opposed to just doing the stuff that we want to do, and some of the stuff that we might not want to do, but we know needs to get done, Like I built a skunk wall yesterday. I didn't want to do it, but someone had to.
The skunk wall. That's not something you hear every day. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's talking about like the conditioned thought pattern, right? Of
Uh-huh.
being stuck in terms of like identifying with my thoughts, and then there's more of the knowing behind it, which is more of who we actually are, not the stuff up here that we think that we are. And thinking myself lazy, right? So what is that? What is your interpretation of that? What does that come down to?
I think that's a freeze response. I do that a lot as well. I think I'm just projecting because I didn't really get into it with him. I'm actually going to have a conversation with him tomorrow. But you're a personal trainer. Like, you see it all the time. There's this internal mechanism in us that doesn't want to push us outside of what we're normally doing. So when they show up, they have this voice that it's like they can only get 40% of the effort in, and then their voice shuts them down from being as strong as they want to be, or doing as much as they want to be, or just putting in the effort for a full hour, or a half an hour to start out with. I when After being sick for a month and a half, I actually just went for a walk, and when I came back, I was completely overwhelmed. Like, the whole energy that was moving through my body was creating this noise in my head. And I lay down on the couch, and it was actually an emotional experience for me. I was just sitting there laughing at it, mainly because years ago I would have been identifying with the voice and letting it control. But when I was watching this process, it's just sometimes our body needs to metabolize the stress that we're in, and people don't realize that we're hunter gatherers. 98.8% of the history of humanity was encased in a certain way of living. The other 0.02% is what we're actually experiencing now. We're not built for this shit. Like, the modern society is so overwhelming to the senses of us that we're always feeling like we're running out of time, we're not doing enough, and this, that, and the other. And if you add any ingrained prepubescent trauma that you might have experienced from lack of love, or too much aggression, or whatever it was in your family, you built these defense mechanisms that helped you, get so far out of tune. And now when people are trying to create I know the guy that was talking about it. I experienced the same thing when I'm trying to create something like my next book or whatever it is. That voice, that thing that is there, just it overwhelms the senses, and I get sucked into it. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
then oddly enough, the soothing gestures that I take produce more overwhelm. So I'll get on Instagram or Twitter,
Oh,
and it's
Twitter,
just this,
that'll help you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's just this echoing of rage that we're not trying to feel inside, so we have to project it or feel it on the outside, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think you mentioned important something that there too is just like identifying with that, which we often get caught in, like identifying with our thoughts. So if you have like this judgment of I'm being lazy, then that means I am lazy, even though we have the thought of feeling lazy, or the fear of being rejected, or the fear of whatever our conditioning is telling us about, and identifying with who we actually are. And that's when we add on top of this emotional stuff over and over and over again.
Mhm.
But if we can decipher between our conditioned response or our conditioned self from our true self, and just like through the process of meditation, you don't try to clear your head and think of nothing. You're simply being the observer of what's going on up here and being able to distance yourself from that. So a lot of times when people get stuck in this emotional shit, it's such a heavy relating to it, rather just being aware of this is what I'm feeling for now and moving through it, and not identifying and relating to that emotion or to that thought process. Because when
Mhm.
we relate and identify, we get really stuck. It's like, okay, I'm feeling pretty angry right now. I'm feeling shame, or I'm feeling upset or frustrated. It's okay, cool. Move through that, and then it kind of dissipates.
When you
But
say move
the
through
whole,
that, describe moving through that for you. What's that look like for you?
sometimes even just like the physical act of moving, it doesn't have to be exercise or working out. It can just be like getting up and walking around, or it can just be sitting in it and like energetically moving through it and just being
Mhm.
present with it. Because if we're not present with it, or we're not like aware of it, that's when all the suppression comes in, right? We try to do more shit. We try to be really productive and pile on our to-do list to bypass this sensation or this emotion that we have, rather than just like literally just having it come up and then out, and keeping that tension of that experience so that it can kind of dissipate.
Mm.
So there's a lot of bypassing. Like social media is great for that, because we can just go on anything and just distract ourselves, or we have our to-do list of they're never ending to distract ourselves. And so we all have like our coping mechanisms to deal with that, the emotional response of something in the past, or the worry of the future, whatever it is. Um, but it's just, it can be uncomfortable to be yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Where do you think it comes from? What's your theory on that? I'm reading a really good book that I want to share with you. A friend of mine, he's a psychopharmacologist, also a therapist, practicing therapist, one of the most intellectually gifted thinkers that I know. I mean, this guy is just far out there when it comes to the amount of information that he's pulled in and the amount of wisdom that he has. And he's like me, where he has a soothing retreat mechanism that he retreats inside of himself and learns more stuff anytime he doesn't want to feel the feeling that he never wanted to feel in the first place. He was he recommended this book and posted a chapter, just like a screenshot chapter of the book on Instagram last week, and or on Sunday, and I ordered it from Amazon, paid for the fast shipping, got it 4 hours later. I'm like maybe 100 pages into it. I've never felt so understood in my life. Like I've always had, you've heard me talk about it several times. I've had this overwhelming sense of worthlessness. It's never been like I've tried to fill it with drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, every addiction imaginable, intellectualism, superiority, all of it, and could never fill it. And within the first chapter of this book, all of the negative self-talk that's in my head, the guy literally quoted me. Well, it manifests in one of four ways, and he's like, and I'm like, all of them. So where do you think that this original, because that's what I'm seeing for myself and for the clients I'm working with, is that there's this original wound that we never wanted to feel. So we built this mechanism around it to protect ourselves, that vulnerability. And the whole experience of life seems to be like the allegory of the cave, where we're creating this reality to protect the thing that we invented in the first place so that we don't have to feel that pain that we'll have to feel to finally be comfortable with ourselves. It's like that everlasting loop. So again, where do you think this comes from? And is there a continuum? Because that's what I'm noticing. I think I think there's a continuum that you experience, that most people experience, either not at all to holy shit, it's overwhelming.
Where exactly does what come from?
The whole loop, the mental loop of protecting the thing that doesn't need to be protected, or as you said, it's really kind of uncomfortable at first to just be yourself. Like, why is it so fucking uncomfortable to be yourself?
Because the version of you that you thought you were has to die. And so we protect that identity. We protect that label. Because what if everything that I thought about myself wasn't right? That's a scary thought. And that's a lot of threat. So, we build these defense mechanisms to fulfill our narrative around who we are, what we believe, what we think is right. Our philosophies, our paradigms, our perspectives, the way that we see the world, which leads to a lot of this rage and self-righteous indignation. But it's just letting go of who we thought we were to embrace who we actually are. And I think we talked about this in the last call. Like, we always know, but there's an aspect of rejection around that. And what would it mean about me if I was actually who I truly am? And there's the fear of perception around what other people may think, or what about my life would actually change? Because there is a lot of safety in comfortability, right? And nothing changing, even though we have the desire to feel more free, to feel lighter, to do things we want to do. But there's a lot of threat in the unknown. And life really starts to begin once we don't have this attachment to the outcome of what am I going to get as a result of doing this, or what's going to happen if. So we protect ourselves through prediction, and we protect ourselves through upholding this story around who we think we actually are.
Hmm.
And society has led us to believe that if you're a certain way, you're less than a human, right? If you don't have this job or this status, or you don't look a certain way, whatever these standards that have been created for us that we're supposed to strive for to be a good citizen, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that for some reason that's not good enough, or you have to improve yourself to be loved or accepted or respected or liked.
Hmm.
So many of us are chasing this idealized version or this potential of ourselves, all while neglecting and rejecting who we actually are all along. And some of us think, well, it's like this dangling carrot in the future, right? Once I get there, I'll finally be able to bring this big sigh of relief, and I'll be safe and okay, and my life can begin. But up here, no matter where we are, it's still not enough,
Hmm.
because we've always rejected our knowing and always rejected ourselves along the
Where
way.
do you think that comes from? The rejection of the knowing and the rejection of ourselves. Is it conditioned into us? Lack of nurturing in
Yeah,
nature?
I'm going to say mostly nurture.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's mostly nurture. Because from what I'm noticing and just from what I'm seeing, everything's a skill. Like, we come in here, like, I've been around babies, man. They don't know how to do anything except for scream and get their emotional needs either met or rejected. And I think that that's where it comes from, is that during that time of I'm super vulnerable, big people protect me, we're surrounded by people that never learned how to handle vulnerability. So it's just this ever evolving loop of madness, um yeah. Yeah. So
And we look at the past.
what's the magic button quick fix of that? Because isn't that what everyone wants? 6-minute abs.
Yeah, that's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
But they
But
think they actually, but they don't.
yeah.
They don't want the abs. They want the feeling of confidence and trust that they think the abs will give them.
And it's so
We want to
terrible
be,
that like I remember when I had abs and I was like, I still don't feel good about myself. Like, what the fuck? I look like this and I still want to fucking punch myself in the face. What's going on here? So fuck it, I'm gonna eat ice cream.
yeah, that's the funny thing about body image. We think that if our body changes, our image of self will change. And actually, it's quite the other way around. When my image of self changes, my body will change as a result. But that's a little different topic. Um, but what was your initial question? I totally lost track
I
there. I
don't
got
know.
you
I
focused
was
on.
more interested in what you were just talking about. I'm like, let's fuck there. Screw that question. Open that up a little
Yeah,
bit.
let's roll with body image then, since that's a pretty big thing. So like we have this identity around ourselves, right? And so what we see in the mirror is going to be categorized as like pretty, not pretty, attractive, not attractive, cellulite, gross, dad bod, not manly enough, or woman, not womanly enough, whatever, right? So we have these standards in our head of what beauty is, even though beauty is precognitive and it's not, it comes before any form of intellectualizing what it actually is. But it's like we have these comparisons to other people. And part of that conditioning is if I open up Shape magazine, I'm going to see an airbrushed woman, a picture of a woman who looks like she's really in shape. I'm only going to see her best angles after they've been uh, shadowed the right way and corrected the right way. And this must be what people want. And this is what we have to strive for. And if she looks happy, I'm going to be happy if I look that way. But I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to feel better about myself until I reach this idealized version of this. And because we're always rejecting that we're not there yet, it creates a very challenging process because it's never good enough, because it's not this thing that we think is the promised land, which is the gold at the end of the rainbow. But all this is just a story around how we perceive ourselves and the shame around that image. And so when we identify with our body, it's like, this is who I am, but you're not your body. And someone says in the mirror, like, I'm fat. Well, you are not fat. You have fat. I have hair. I don't call myself hair, but we identify ourselves as being fat. So all this goes back to this identity that we create about ourselves, but we don't really have an identity. We have things about us. There's things that we do, but it's not who we are. And then when we're free of all of this, then we can just be this unconditioned version of ourselves that we don't relate or attach to. And that's where the freedom comes.
When you're free, you said when you're free of all of it. Um, you're like me. You've tested out probably everything from journaling to meditating to masturbation to soothe that feeling, to unravel it. What are some of the most powerful tools? Like if you were to start anyone off with one thing that helped them become more aware of the awareness of what's happening, this prediction and response mechanism inside them that's protecting something that isn't real. What what is the like where's the first step that somebody could take so that they can then maybe start identifying what the next step is?
It all comes down to trust and self trust. And when we start listening to our intuition and following through on that knowing without being attached through what am I going to get as a result of that, we increase that feeling of trust, which kind of extends to confidence, or I got this, or I'm good enough to do this next thing. So when we get this feeling of I should do this, and it feels like I should do it without running through the filter of what's going to happen or what am I going to get in exchange for doing this, then there's a whole different energy behind that choice. And we can feel that. And that's the feeling that we want.
Be
Is
less
that no matter
ambiguous
where
with
I am,
this. Hold on a second. Be less ambiguous. Like put it in like I know that you're not somebody that wants to talk about tangible goals, but just pick one of the tangible goals that you or a client has and then play it out again the way that you just did. Because the ambiguity, I can't handle ambiguity very well. So be a little
okay.
more specific. Let's do weight loss since we're sticking with that, or money, whichever one you want to pick.
Let's just say that you're running a business online and there's something that you really want to say. And you can feel the almost nervous apprehension of you posting it. You can feel it running through your body, and you're almost shaking when you type it. Or if you're doing a Facebook Live and you're like, oh shit, I don't know if I want to go here. So you know that you want to say it, but there's also the fear of the what if I do it. But the moment that you do that, there's a great relief and sense of freedom behind communicating that. So the conditioning is the fear of rejection. What are people going to think? What if they don't like me? What if I get blasted on Facebook for it? But the freedom that comes with exercising that choice to do that is that form of trust.
How do you
Is
how do
that
you
feeling
how do you
confident?
how do you how do you make sure in that context that it's you driving and not the impulsive egoic self? You know, because for instance, it feels good when I don't want to deal with the shit that I'm dealing with. Getting on Twitter and rage tweeting or sharing a article and passive aggressively making sure that I say the right things so that the guy from high school that I want to make fun of gets into my news feed and starts commenting and I can tear him apart and feel superior. That feels good. You know, do you see what I'm saying? Ice cream. Again, if we have ice cream in the fridge, I'm going to eat it at night. And on the reverse side of that, other than the satisfaction that I get from, hey, I just made a healthy choice, I never like just think I want to eat broccoli. You know, I've been buying it lately and eating it every day just because my body is like, broccoli's the right choice, man. I know you like ice cream, but broccoli's the thing. Let's do it. So how do you learn that level of trust so that you're not trusting the asshole that's inside of you that has only immediate gratification in mind?
Right. So that's where it gets tricky. So you said something like, I want to post something so that guy in Facebook says something. So you're already attached to an agenda or an outcome that you wanted to create as a result of doing it.
As opposed to this is just what's in my heart to talk about right
Right. With no attachment or expectation around it.
now. Okay.
Right. So that's more clean and raw than I'm going to do this in order to get a response.
But how do you so you are you sitting in it long enough to actually recognize, because that's how I quit smoking, that's how I quit addictions. I literally just sat, there's this window of impulsivity that I got to do it, and then you do it, and then the relief comes for a minute until you build up enough energy to have to do it again. Sitting through that uncomfortableness so that I can finally hear why I want to do it and then resolve that issue. Same with the social media posting and stuff like that. How do you get to that point where because I think that most people are so unconscious that that's what they're doing. I'm actually conscious that's what I'm doing, and I laugh about it as I'm posting it. Like my wife is like, "Why are you doing it then?" And I'm like, "I'm fucking bored. I just want to. I'm gonna fuck with this guy from Ohio, or So, how do you distinguish the two? Is it just through the act of mindfulness that you get to learn how to find it, which person to trust inside?
Well, I guess, why do you want to fuck with this guy in Ohio? What is it I'm trying to get for me out of this exchange? Right. So again, it's the expectation of reciprocity.
Yeah, okay. I get that. I get that. So you just got
So
to
that's
so you just got to own the decision that you make, you go do it, and then reverse, like backfill. Why the hell did I just do that? What was I really getting out of that? Where did the relief come from? And then once you can see that, you can go, oh wait, that's not a healthy decision. Is that what you're saying?
well, if we go back to it being skillful and the intent,
Hmm.
what is this place that I'm actually coming from? Is it to fulfill my superiority or my arrogance? And sometimes that perception of arrogance or superiority looks a certain way to people based off their conditioning,
Mhm.
right? So how people may perceive me or you as being arrogant just it's because of their perception around things and their conditioning.
Yeah.
but only we know, and that's the only thing that really matters.
All right. All right. So what's your favorite tool in this? Like when you're looking at the main three, the way you're showing up for your relationship at home, uh, the way that you're showing up in the gym, the way that you're showing up in your business, what's your favorite tool to stay in the driver's seat and not get into that collapsed energy, as you call it?
I I used to do a lot of meditation and journaling, and I didn't really have time to be useful anymore.
No?
It was
So
always like
you
this
think that
process of
do
trying to
you think
make
that's
something.
because you got to a certain point, um, like you mastered the basics and now you can work all that out in your head so much that it's just easier, or was it was it mental masturbation the whole time?
No, I mean I wouldn't say I mastered it, but it's just like it's kind of like doing more stuff and just researching more information when you already know. It's like I'm not allowing myself to do this, and so if I meditate on it, it's kind of giving me this bypass. It's not to say that meditation or journaling isn't helpful at all. Like I think there's some usefulness you can get out of it, but if that is a way to try to take this back door through this process, it's probably not going to work because you're still not owning who you are, right?
You
It's like
said this
I'm gonna
process.
meditate.
What do you mean by this process?
Like, okay, let's just take meditation for example. Like I'm feeling really stressed out, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, so I'm going to meditate to slow down, recenter, and reground myself. Okay, if I always have to meditate, what's actually happening that's causing me to need to ground myself and recenter myself all the time? And so if you look back at this, there's something that's either happening in this physical container that's causing me to feel stressed out, that's causing me to feel overwhelmed, or whatever emotional stuff is coming up for me. So what is that? What is my attachment? What is my story? What is my identity that's causing this constant feeling of overwhelm? So if we address it from the source, if you will, or the root, then we don't have to do all this managing work or self-care work all the time. We can just
Yeah,
cut to the core of it right away.
because that spiritual work turns into a spiritual bypass most of the time, huh? That's
Well,
been my experience at least. Oh, let me
it's not
share the book with
all of
you.
it's bad.
So this is the book, by the way, Complex PTSD. I definitely have uh, my biggest issue is I've known for a while, and I've been working on the spiritual bypass stuff to tame down post traumatic stress disorder. This actually goes all the way back to the beginning, first 2 to 3 years of your life. How he's suggesting that uh, you can, whether you were beaten severely, sexually abused, or just a little bit neglected, your brain can actually form post traumatic stress as you're forming your own sense of identity and where you are in the world at such a young age, that your identity gets centered in the ego as opposed to the observer of the ego. And then that's he's suggesting that if the DSM focused on what he calls complex post-traumatic stress, that there would only be two or three other kind of uh, diagnoses, that all of the diagnoses are actually a symptom of this. And he's like, so like I said, the way he described it, my friend actually, he was like, this is one of the most affirming books I've read. And he's only said that to two other books, and both of them have been like, just opened up the world of a different perspective for me, that's why I immediately got it and paid for the fast shipping. And like I said, I'm on page 129. So I think, like, if anyone is having a hard time processing trauma, they might want to get this book here, because it might give them a mental framework on how to work with it. And it does give some pretty practical exercises based on mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of the how to use each of these things in order to reprogram what's going on inside. And it's not in a way that is like a manipulative kind of. And his process, which I think you've heard me say personally a few times, like, when I realized it wasn't going to go away was when it started to not have an effect on me. When I stopped wanting this to not be the way that it is. When I stopped calling myself broken because I have these emotions that are really hard to contain. When I stopped thinking that, okay, today's the day I wake up and finally can look in the mirror and not want to throw up. When I just and I stopped expecting to look in the mirror and throw up. I just, pass the mirror and I'm like, hey, I like that guy today, or hey, you're a big fat piece of shit. And I just saw this happening going, yeah, it's just never going to go away. I started once that happened, and it was maybe 2 years ago. Things started to work differently for me. Things started to work through me a little differently, and I gave up goals as well. I'm not as adherent to it as you are. I still have, I looked at my bank account and I was like, probably should go make some more money. I want to buy a new paddle board, so I need to maybe get some more clients or something like that. But I don't really care either way. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that big of a deal, but I do see that there are some behavioral changes that need to happen. So I do have like a quarterly kind of, let's see if I can create this, but not out of like, if I don't create it, I'm a big, like, I want to be 170 pounds. Like, do I want to live at 170 pounds? Probably not. I like being bigger than that. But that's what I hate to say striving for, but you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna move towards that and see how it goes, but I don't really care either way.
I think this
So,
is something important there too. Is like today's the day I'm going to finally something, right? And so
yeah.
we are future pacing this prediction of today is going to be this way for myself. And so we set that expectation and we live in that space. And then the moment comes to experience it, and it's like, shit, it's not what I thought it was going to be based off of what I told myself was going to happen. So it all comes back to this constant state of presence and awareness all the time. So we're not always ahead all the time.
Yeah.
That's where we get screwed up. That's anxiety. That's overwhelm, overthinking.
Yeah. I keep coming back to, what's this guy's name? Michael Gervais. He's the mindset coach for the Seattle Seahawks. He has a podcast, great podcast called, uh, Finding Mastery. He had maybe 2 weeks ago, had a great talk with Jack Cornfield, about mindfulness, and he was how to asking Jack and telling about his own practice. And he was saying something to the effect of, practice active gratitude in a way that you and I will make fun of. You know what I mean? And Cornfield's listening to him, and he's like, so I make sure that I keep a track of how often I'm in that open space and blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. And Cornfield was like, and not in a way that was disparaging towards that. Like he was just like, I get that, and I used to do that too, but I just really got in tune with the laws of nature, and there's an ebb and there's a flow. And sometimes my heart is wide open and sometimes it's closed. And I've learned that when it's closed, those are the times I need to actually pull back from interacting, talking, being with other people, trying to relate, because my heart's closed. I don't want to relate. And that's okay too. Like, I don't have to control this. And he said, and then when you let go of the control, it stays open longer. But as soon as you notice it stays open longer and you pat yourself on the back, it closes again. And he was like,
Right.
so I just learned to watch it and notice it and use that as my compass of, this is time to move forward, this is time to pull back, because that's what it's there for, instead of trying to control it and be this. He was like, there is no idealized version. We're humans, we're beings,
Exactly.
and we're experiencing, and your experience can't be my experience. So me holding myself to your standards or holding myself to standards that I had yesterday doesn't really track or make any sense whatsoever. So I
Right.
thought, I don't think he said all of that, but after he said all of that, I sat there and I was actually thinking of conversations with you and sat there and went through, and I was like, yeah, like just do it or don't. Who cares? Like you're insignificant. Relax, you know?
And you said something important there too, is like this idea of control, to feel certain, to create safety, to create
Mm-hmm.
prediction. But the walls get very limiting in that. The box gets tighter and tighter the more that we try to control people, situations, events, circumstances. And it all comes back down to that feeling of trust in
Yeah.
ourselves, in the moment, doing whatever we want
think
to
I
do.
think that sentence, the reason it's not hitting home with me the way that I can see it coming out of you is it same as I think I talked about it last week, is the difference between self-improvement and self-realization. So you're talking about self-realized trust. And each time you say trust in yourself, I'm thinking of the self improvement part of me. And I'm like, I've already proven that I can't trust myself, dude. Like, I'm not trustworthy. I'm a liar all the time. Like, that's all I do is I lie. I look at myself and think I'm a small, insignificant turd of a human being that is worthless and doesn't deserve love. Like, why would I trust that asshole? And then I'm like, oh yeah, wait. Self-realized trust is what he's talking about. So that's a
Right. And that
distinction that I thought I should
back
make.
to the comparison of the past or to the future and
Yeah.
relating to those events.
Oh, that's why I brought up Mike Gervais. One of the concepts that he talks about a lot is because he talks about getting into flow and how athletes are on a continuum. They're either underengaged or overengaged. And then there's this little spot where they're in flow. And he said, if you ever talk to anybody that's in flow, what they're actually talking about is that they are on time. Like the part of them that wants to be in the future is not in the future. They're not future pacing. They are in time. And he was like, and when you're on time, no matter if it's an athletic event or writing or whatever it is, making love, when you're actually on time, time doesn't move the way you imagine it does. Time doesn't move at the pace of humanity. Time moves very, very slow. And the closer you get to being on time, the quicker it passes you by. It's almost like you're moving at the speed of light and not moving at all when you're on time, because you can be in something and be like, felt like 5 minutes and it was 3 hours later. So
Yeah.
that's why I brought up Gervais. Sorry, my brain has to take the long road all the time. How do you
Yeah.
get
So
on
it's like
time?
there's nowhere else to be.
How is that a practice? Do you have to remind yourself of, or are you able just to stay in there's no, that reminds me of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You gotta walk, remember Damone? You gotta walk in like there's nowhere else to be. Order for the lady.
Well, think about it this way: what causes us to be not in time, right? There's a pressure and there's an urgency around having to get shit done. Typically, right? It's I have to do this. I have to do this. I have all this stuff, future pacing in my head. Well, it's okay. It's like, well, there's some things that I may have to give my attention to today, but I'm going to do what I need to do now in order to get to that
Say that
thing.
last sentence again.
I'm going to do the things whatever I need to do
Nope,
right now.
the one before.
I don't remember what I just said.
You said there are these things that I have to give my attention to today.
Right. Or I want to, or I intend to,
But that's a
without using
pretty
that
powerful
to as a
statement.
yeah.
That I want to give my attention. There are things I want to give my attention to today. I think if that was the conversation going on in people's heads, because I definitely don't want to give my attention to Ted Cruz. Definitely don't want to give my attention to the guy from high school that I never want to share a meal with. And when I go to bed or can't sleep at night, it's because I didn't give my attention to uh, the writing that I wanted to do, or the creating that I wanted to do, or the walking or the body movements that I really wanted to do. But like the reason we started this conversation was because people get in their heads so much that they create their own laziness. They create the resistance that's inside them. And I think that that sentence that you wrote or that you just said would help free a lot of people. What do I want to give my attention to today? Knowing that your attention and your time are the most limited, most valuable resources on the planet. What deserves my attention today? Huh. I like that. Sorry to interrupt, man. I do that a lot.
Okay, that's why we're having this conversation. But you know, the way to think about it is, what is it that I want to do, and in my schedule and my time.
My schedule.
Because like, if we look at Gary Vee, I had a conversation with someone in a group yesterday. It's like, well, Gary Vee gets up at 4:30, does all this shit, and he's go all day long. If you want to be successful, if you do all this shit, and all of a sudden I feel so much pressure. I have to be this person that does shit all the time, never shuts off, and now I'm procrastinating, I'm freezing because I can't be Gary Vaynerchuk. It's like, what the fuck? Why don't you just be you and do what you want to do? And then all of a sudden everything got done.
Which is funny because if you listen to Gary long enough, he's actually saying what you just said. Don't be me.
Right.
Like, I'm showing you what I did, but at the beginning I was doing like just talking shit about wine so I could sell more wine in my wine store. And then I kind of hit this stride and he goes, but go back, look at the first 2 years. No one watched anything I did. I just was talking, blah, 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 blah. He's like, you can't be me. You got to be you, but you can broadcast it on all of these different mediums and other people will be like, I like him. I like her,
Right.
you know? Yeah. Yeah, and that's
So
the thing is that we get into that comparison mode with ourselves and with Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and you know whatever flavor of the week of I am the most successful life coach in the world. You know, that's actually, oh man, that's why I talk so much shit to the guy from high school instead of putting content out there because I'm like, dude, who am I going to try to be? Grant Cardone and take pictures of myself in front of a non-existent jet? Like, I don't want
or
to
we
be
can
those people.
buy Lopez and buy 30 Lamborghinis in your garage.
I wonder if I can put it. Well, I've got a surfboard next to my here in my office.
There you go.
My first mentor.
Right.
So anyhow,
Which goes back to the conditioning again. I have to be this thing that I'm not in order to be successful or to be of worth or of value. But it's just no, I have to be myself, doing what I want to do all the time because it turns me on to do it, and that's the sweet spot.
how long did it take you to hit the sweet spot? Like the first, like was it like I imagine that it's the same kind of growth and transformational cycle that we see at the beginning of working out. I hate working out. I hate, and then you get to a point where okay, I still hate it, but I can't not do it. You know, like you just build up this rhythm where it just becomes such an ingrained part of what you do in life. It's part of your day. So
Well, part of it is like, stop doing the shit that you don't want to do.
that's the first step.
You
Just
don't
stop
have to
doing
do
it.
it.
Just say
Like,
no.
no, you're no. Say fucking, like, I don't want to do this because I don't have to. I maybe have convinced myself I have to for X, Y, and Z, for to please people or to keep the peace, whatever it is. But there's a lot of obligations that we have to other people that we just do it to maintain the relationship, even though we know that it's probably not the best if we continue this, or work with clients we know that we shouldn't be working with, but we do anyway because we feel like we should help them. So it's listening again back to this intuition, knowing of what we should say yes to and what we should say no to. And the more no's you have, the more freedom you have to do what you really want to do.
And then that kind of blends into everything else because the more freedom you have, the more freedom you express, the more you express yourself, the less you need all of the soothing stuff that distracts you in the first place. So me practicing this, that's why I don't know why I keep going, okay, like I'm literally thinking about, oh, okay, I gotta make some broccoli and cauliflower and put some eggs over top of it after this conversation. And normally I'd be like, let's go eat some cookies. Like, you know, actually part of me is like, no, I want cookies. Like, so the less fucks given, the less fat there is.
Exactly. And the more fucks you get. So all this is like the same, like heavy attachment based energy, right? If I'm gonna expressing myself, or let's just take a really common thing, like at work, I am in a meeting and I don't speak up because I'm afraid of the way that I look, or I'm afraid what people are going to think if I finally say the truth. Now I'm going to go home because I'm ruminating it all day long that I didn't communicate what I wanted to say. But fuck, those cookies look good. So I'm going to eat my feelings because I didn't express myself. And all this shit's the same everywhere. It transcends every area of life.
Yeah.
It's the same
You
type of
think
energy,
think that
restriction.
other people doing this is actually affecting each other doing it? Say that somebody is a very aggressive person when their own shit is coming up and they're in charge. So maybe people have all that going on, plus their boss is a narcissistic bully who, if you try to have any idea in front of the crowd that he can't take complete credit for, she can't take complete credit for, she's going to destroy you in front of everybody. So might as well just keep your head down so you get to keep your paycheck. Like, is that like where do you find a balance there? Because it's easy for somebody like yourself or myself to be like, just do whatever I want to do because we like I couldn't do whatever. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I've always that I was going to say I couldn't do that, but that's why I was a bartender. Like I remember when I was in Cambridge, Ohio, one of the bartenders I was working with, I went up to a guy and I said, "Hey, man, what do you do for a living?" And he said, "County sheriff." And I said, "Hey, so when you're sitting there in your little speed trap, do I ever knock on the window and slap the cock out of your mouth?" And he was like, "Excuse me?" And I said, "Like, do I come and fuck with you at your job?" He said, "I don't know where this is coming from." And I said, "The woman that is working with me is a mother of 4 children, just trying to come in here and make money to feed her babies. And you keep calling her sweet tits. And I keep hearing it. And if I hear it one more time, I don't care if you're a cop, sheriff, or whatever, I'm going to jump across the bar and take teeth out of your head. Now, apologize to her or get the fuck out, one or the other." And he was like livid, gets the man or the owner over, and the owner is like, "Did you say that to him?" And I said, "Absolutely. I meant every word of it too." He finally makes him apologize because he agreed with me. And she looks at me and she goes, "How can you just say that to people?" And I was like, "There's a bar on every corner. I can go anywhere I want to work, but I don't have to put up with anybody's disrespect, and neither do you." So I guess I don't like my wife. I can't, never mind. Can't talk about that. It's not, not mine to talk about, but that's the part that I want to get people to is I want people to get to a point where they don't have to put up with other people's bullshit. Because that's what I'm noticing is that a lot of the stuff that people are going through is because they're being abused by narcissists all day long. And then they come home, they don't have the freedom and the autonomy that we've created for ourselves, that they had to live under someone else's thumb and someone else's rules. So how
But
do
they always have a choice.
absolutely, but when the choice, and especially in this economy, when the choice is put up with their shit, keep your head down and don't lose your job, that's a hard choice to make, man. People just can't walk out of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and figure out how to pay their mortgage next month because they weren't fiscally responsible in the first place. So how do you draw that fine line to be able to have that place of knowing, but also cover your ass a little bit, because you might not be in a position to just tell someone, that's not okay.
Well, you have to recognize that you have a choice and you're allowing this to continue based off the choice that you made to stay.
Yeah.
So you're submitting to that experience, even if it may suck. But we often tell ourselves they don't have a choice. Because they don't have a choice, I feel trapped. But we always have a choice.
Yeah.
But we have to own either decision any choice that we make in the
Sometimes
first place.
sometimes the right choice is to eat shit for a while, right? Like
As long as you use the right seasonings and spices, I think it's okay.
that's what I think. I
But
mean, that's what I did for 2 or 3 years when I was waiting tables. I didn't want to wait tables, but I wanted to pay rent, so I went and waited tables. Like, it wasn't a big
I think
deal.
right. But that's what it recognizes. I am choosing this, even if it is an unpleasant circumstance. I am making this choice for myself.
Hmm.
So that also brings autonomy to it. That I do have an option. I may not be exercising it, but I still have freedom in that. Versus I am trapped and there's nothing I can do, and pointing the finger at everybody else and blaming, because then we become a victim of the circumstance rather than being a voluntary participant of the consequences of this choice.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. It is just a reframing of the story you're trying to tell yourself to go, wait, none of that's real. Like, can I put up with this shit? Yeah. Do I need to defend myself? Like let them talk. It doesn't mean anything, you know. It does. It's a challenge, obviously, because they're pushing your buttons for their own reasons. And when buttons get pushed, we have ingrained responses that we need soothed. But I guess that
Sometimes.
yeah, no, well, I personally like I personally lean into it. Like I invite that a lot because I find that the stuff that I'm trying to soothe doesn't need soothed. And without this person pushing the button, I don't learn it anyhow. Like I need someone to push that pain for me. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like when a doctor is moving your arm around, if you like to find out if you have a rotator cuff tear or whatever it is, bursitis or whatever, they're pushing, and until they hit the spot of the pain, you don't know where it is. So I kind of invite those to some degree, but at the same time, because I work from home and have for such a long time, I really don't have to put up with other people's shit as much. So I was trying to figure out ways to communicate that to somebody that, again, there's people that are in precarious that their correct choice is just to shut up. The correct choice is don't take it personally and keep moving and get yourself out of that situation when you can. But, you know, obviously if you're in an abusive relationship and somebody's hurting you or threatening your physical well-being, get out as soon as possible and figure it out as you go. But if your family's going to starve because you walk out of a job today, that's probably not the best choice. You know, that's you got to make those choices rationally. How would
But
you
going,
make, huh?
I want to touch back in your doctor analogy. It's like, well, it hurts, doc, when I keep doing this. It's like, okay, well, stop doing that, right? But we also subject ourselves to the same thing that causes the same pain over and over again because for some reason we also kind of like it, right? Like the evidence, having is evidence of wanting. Even if we consciously don't want it, it's still serving us in some way to put ourselves through this shit because again, it fulfills a story, it fulfills a narrative of certainty and identity around who we are.
Hmm.
So without the story, there's a lot less pain. Without the identity, there's a lot less pain. But we're twisted. So we like that shit because it's known and it's comfortable.
I like it. Any practical wisdom that you want to leave people with other than it doesn't matter and you don't have to give a shit? Because I think that I love to see the reaction when you post shit like that. People are like, "What do you mean it doesn't matter? It's perfectly
Tune in
fine."
next week. Tune in next week for more. So tune in next week for more wisdom and discussion.
Wisdom.
There's plenty of it throughout this conversation, and me teaching and just saying
The same
this.
thing. Are we
Doesn't.
just going to say the same thing every week then? Because I think that we'll have a 3-episode podcast at this point.
It's the same thing but different,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Because each conversation is a little bit different. It touches on different perspectives,
Yeah.
but sometimes we just need to hear things in multiple ways, different conversations for it to click or to make sense. Or you can reach out to one of us and we have a conversation around it, which will probably be more impactful instead of the joy of just consuming more information.
Or yeah, well, that would be definitely more impactful. Um, how do they reach you? On Facebook? Is that the best way?
Facebook, that lovely messenger button. Or
Yeah.
you can troll me in my posts too, and we can get nice
I love trolling you in your post.
conversation. I know you do, man. But I do have to bounce. I got another call coming up. But as
All right,
always, man,
man.
it's a pleasure.
You want to do this again next week?
You
Keep
got
it
it.
going on Development Podcast. Yeah.
Anti-development podcast.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah. So anybody that's not like Galen who doesn't want to read anymore or learn anything else, it, if you're having a problem with some of the concepts we're talking about, this book is pretty spot on for anybody that may have had some form of trauma in early childhood development. That tends to never go away, and it treats itself just like post-traumatic stress. All that we're talking about, Galen and I talk about, is the way that the limbic system processes the world as you experience it, and changing its processing of the world by not getting wrapped up into it. If that's hard for you, check out this book so you can let go of some of the trauma and retrain your brain. Okay?
All right. See you guys.
Later.